All right, peace and blessings, everybody. February 15th, 2018. It's Thursday, I believe. This is Daniel Riley, been in prison for over 10 years. I can tell you he is a scholar and a gentleman, incredible painter, drummer, knows the constitutional history of this country, does some incredible writings that we've captured and put up on yearofjubilee.com. And we communicate with him. He usually calls us on Friday. And so last time he called us, I asked him to write a letter on a response to some comments left on immigration. And we've uploaded his letter. It just came in today. If you go to Year of Jubilee and click on More and then click on Ed and Elaine Brown, scroll down. At the very top is a painting that Daniel Riley did. So check out that painting. I think he's an incredible painter. But if you scroll all the way down, you're going to see Daniel Riley's Patriot Letters 2 of 2, and you'll see Daniel Riley writes on immigration. And so what I did, and I'm not trying to start a fight, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody, although I think Daniel, he doesn't know who Gavin is, first of all. I respect Gavin. I have nothing but the utmost respect. I know he speaks out for liberty. He's an advocate for political prisoners such as Schaefer Cox, Ed and Elaine Brown. But I think I took some of Gavin's comments on open borders and immigration that my wife said that Gavin put on Facebook. And because Daniel Riley has a lot of knowledge in the constitutional history of this country, I asked Daniel Riley to respond to those comments. Keep in mind, Daniel Riley has no clue who Gavin is or what Gavin's history is or his work ethic for political prisoners and to expose police corruption. When Gavin talks about blue ISIS, I'm right there with him. I do not agree with Gavin on immigration, but this video is not about my belief system. I could make another video and tell you about that. I haven't even read Daniel Riley's letter, but Daniel Riley gave me a cover page that was just to me privately, and he said he was very strong in his words, and that's typical of Daniel Riley. If you're familiar with Daniel Riley's writings, he never holds back any punches. He goes for the jugular every time. And so here, let me read Daniel Riley's writing and let's get to it. In January, this is what I sent to Daniel Riley. And I said, do you care to respond to this given your knowledge of the Constitution and your study of American history and the Founding Fathers' intentions? In January 2018, we sent the following comments to Daniel Riley and asked if he would give a comment. The comments we sent him are below. Immigration number 1. There was 3 comments I sent him. Thoughts to ponder. Our Constitution gives the Fed zero authority over immigration, and no U.S. immigration laws existed until after the Civil War. U.S. deportation is a denial due process, while travel restrictions, Border Patrol, and ICE are as criminal as the Bureau of Land Management and the EPA. A cowboy in 1860 did not ask permission to cross the border. These restrictions were created by the global elite for division and wealth redistribution, kept in place through propaganda and fear. They have nothing to do with sovereign borders. Our choice is to get informed and stand up or oppose the Constitution and human rights while becoming pawns for the global elite. I used to think like the herd, then I studied the history. I challenge anyone to prove this wrong with historical facts from our Constitution and founding documents. Emotional comments and propaganda will not be accepted. Immigration number 2. If you believe you have more human rights than a foreigner, or that the rights enumerated in our Constitution only apply to documented citizens like you, then you are ignorant of the Constitution, the laws of nature, and nature's God. You are the definition of a racist. I totally disagree with that statement. You know, there is boundaries. God says we are all made of one blood, and God set the boundaries of our habitation. There are walls that were built in the Bible. To say that everyone in the world is welcome to come to America and have the rights of citizens is absurd, in my opinion. I'm not for keeping freedom from anybody. But if I was born in North Korea, I would want to fight for freedom of the North Koreans. If I was born in Mexico, I would want to fight for the freedoms of my Mexican countrymen. I would not expect to be able to come to America and be treated with the full rights of a citizenship. And it's not to say that I'm racist. I just think that there are borders and there are countries, and that's the definition of countries and borders. And there's also a thing called birthright. Our founding fathers gave us a birthright, and the person that God hated the most was Esau, who gave up his birthright. I'm not trying to limit the freedom of anyone on this country. I wish that the freedoms of all men would be prosperous all throughout the world. But to give up our country to everyone in the world and say, you come live here and you can get the full rights of a citizenship, I'm not in agreement with that at all. And I reject the notion that I am a racist because I hold that belief. The third comment that we said was another perspective of anti-borders. It's strange to be railed on by so-called patriots defending the right to travel across borders, yet not one person can present a factual, moral, or constitutional case. They can only regurgitate the propaganda of the global elite. The idea that human beings must be documented and tracked by government for sovereignty and security is repugnant to liberty. It is the role of slaves and has always been the agenda of tyrants. All right, so again, I could give my own impression of these comments that were put out, but let's give Daniel Riley his say-so. He took a lot of time and developed a response. Let's read Daniel Riley's response to those comments. Danbury, Connecticut, February 13th, 2018. Immigration control defended against open border propagandists. I have taken the time to make some observations of a certain individual's discursives concerning immigration in general. His verbal quibble reveals his rash understanding on the topic of immigration as applied to the United States. He postulates that the United States Constitution is silent on immigration, and therefore the central government has been granted zero power to control and enforce the nation's borders. Such a postulation not only exhibits his vulgar folly of deserting his reason, but obliges someone to refute such gibberish. Now see how I, one of those Americans whom you oft dare to call a fake patriot and racist, scorn and mock you, for it would be most unworthy for the American nation to take any public notice of you, you naughty. Like I said, Daniel Riley doesn't hold any punches, and it's not my Daniel Riley has no clue who left these comments. He doesn't know who, but at the same time, he's going to write what he's going to write. Daniel Riley, if you're familiar with his writings, you know that he goes for the jugular every single letter. For it would be most unworthy of the American nation to take any public notice of you, you naughty. Learn, mercenary noisemaker, learn, turn to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, and find the naturalization clause. This gave Congress the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. In other words, who and how an alien becomes an American citizen is determined by the national legislature. For someone of your acuity, I believe I need to further try and clear the fog between your ears. Permit me to explicate that the grant of the naturalization power embraces and infers the power of regulating immigration. Stated differently, the power of regulating immigration is incidental to the power of prescribing rules for naturalization. For example, if you are granted the power over an automobile, you not only have the power to determine its destination, its speed, its route, but also the power to determine who will be permitted as a passenger in the way the Constitution was written, and I am not saying I agree with it. Incidental powers are implied. My opponent, with his comprehension of a kindergartner, just cannot grasp the concept of implied powers. Moving on. Next, my punching bag of wind, turn your attention. Oh, we patriots are an opinionated bunch, are we not? Moving on. Next, my punching bag of wind, turn your attention deficit disorder to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, and find the Commerce Clause. This granted Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. The delivery of people to the United States, regardless of the mode of transportation, is a form of commerce. Foreign passengers to our borders have been taxed and regulated since the founding, first by the states and then by the central government. Furthermore, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, the Treaty Clause, grants power to the President and Senate to make treaties. The realm of such treaties are rightly permitted to deal with, questions on immigration between the treating nations. In tandem, these three powers granted by the Constitution clearly gives the central government control over immigration into the United States. Now that I have sham smashed our troublesome grammarians' crafty fabrications by specifically delineating the immigration powers found in the Constitution, thus proving the central government has the authority to control immigration, let us throw another truth grenade at him. Scared of a little fire, you apostate scarecrow. Let the fire of some Supreme Court case law, which your misguided sense of understanding asserts doesn't exist, further demonstrate my point. In 1884, the U.S. Supreme Court stated, Congress has the power to pass a law regulating immigration as part of the commerce of this country with foreign nations. See E.D.Y.E. versus Robertson, 112 U.S. 580, 600, 1884. In explaining the immigration power, the court said, it's an accepted maxim of international law that every sovereign nation has the power as inherent in sovereignty and essential to self-preservation to forbid the entrance of foreigners with its dominions, or to admit them only in such cases and upon such conditions as it may see fit to prescribe. In the United States, this power is vested in the national government, to which the Constitution has committed the entire control of international relations, in peace as well as war. It belongs to the political department of the government and may be exercised either through treaties made by the President and Senate or through statutes enacted by Congress, upon whom the Constitution has conferred power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, including the entrance of ships, the importation of goods, and the bringing of persons into ports of the United States, to establish a uniform rule of naturalization, to declare war, and to provide and maintain armies and navies, and to make all laws which may be necessary and proper for carrying into effect these powers. See EKIU versus U.S. 142 U.S. 651, 659, 1892. Our pesky rambler says, quote, no U.S. immigration laws existed until after the Civil War, end quote. This turd doesn't hesitate to keep in mind that I have a policy that I do not censor prisoners. I let them use whatever words they want to use. This turd doesn't hesitate to scrape and throw together onto paper every outright falsehood he hears. Hey, numbskull. In January 1795, Congress passed an act establishing a uniform rule of naturalization to carry into effect the power of naturalization clause, the power of the naturalization clause, and declared that any alien may be admitted to become a citizen of the United States or any of them, upon conditions contained in said act and not otherwise. See Sturgis versus Crown and Shield, 4 Wheat, 122, 170, 1817. This ignoramus just doesn't seem to be able to cognize the fundamental principle that immigration may give you the right to leave your country, but that doesn't give you the right to enter any country you choose without the receiving country's consent. This 1795 Act went about prescribing how to get that consent. Let's now bash our antagonist with a little common sense. A country cannot be a country without borders. The first restraint the laws of nature grant to every country is to reserve to themselves the right to protect and uphold its borders, and to be informed of the name and quality of every foreigner that arrives. Nations have a right to keep at a distance of all suspected persons, to forbid the entry of foreigners or foreign merchandise of a certain description, as circumstances may require. Didn't the Israelites have to bob, weave, and war their way through the borders of numerous countries on their way to the Promised Land? Didn't each Israelite tribe set up their own nation-state with borders after they conquered the Promised Land? This historical fact proves borders have always been and will always be. The asinine premise this pernicious weed is basically espousing is a world without borders, without countries. One great big country is the world. Let us take our adversary's weak and perverted reasoning to its logical conclusion. I shudder with horror while I relate this, but it must be related. If there were no borders, then there must be no private property lines either. These lines act as borders that the homeowner or property owner can enforce. So they must go too. Therefore, you would not have the right to determine who can or cannot enter your property or home. It is hardly possible for a wise man to agree with such a truly absurd and irrational premise. Apparently, this silly boy believes that border restrictions were created by the global elite for division and wealth redistribution. Oh, the nonsense he chatters. I cannot help but quote his claims, for he himself usually destroys his argument by means of his own witness. The globalists want a one-world order with one super-world government, with all its accoutrements. To implement this agenda, the global elite first want to entangle all nations into regional economic trade pacts under the pretense of free trade. Next, their theory is this will lead to politically connecting all nations with the concomitant melding together of the nations. This elimination of borders is the death knell of the nation state, something the globalists are determined to accomplish. Now, you forger of lies, who is the pawn of the global elite, you are the one advancing their agenda of border elimination. All you do is lie, 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 and return to your lies like a dog returns to his vomit. You, sir, are in the herd, not us. The plague and pest that he is challenges anyone to prove his premise wrong, but then says emotional and but then says emotional comments and propaganda will not be accepted. Wow, what can I say? The wretch contradicts himself again. All he offers is emotional comments and propaganda himself. He contradicts himself so much that contradiction herself seems to be a twin sister of his. Now that I have dragged him to the light with superior truth, I'll hand him over to be flogged by Satan. This worthless three-legged horse will probably perpetually go on playing the fool and never return to his right senses. If his thick skull is capable of common sense for a moment, and he is able to utter three words like a man in his sound and sober senses that are truthful and capable of being understood, then I may remember who you are. The time I have taken here for my refutation may seem to give this crier's hackneyed chicaneries and importance which they do not deserve. From now on, I exhort everyone to just ignore the rubbish that pours from his mouth, as one would the barking of the neighborhood dog. Take good care, Daniel Riley. My. Let me find the verse of all nations, one blood. There's a verse I want to read. Acts 17:26. It says, and hath made of one blood all nations of men, for to dwell on all the face of the earth. And many people stop right there with the one blood, right? But if you go on to read the second half of the verse, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation. The Bible says that there is a bounds of their habitation. Yes, we are all of one blood. God is no respecter of persons. But we do have borders. There is such a thing as countries. And as much respect as I personally have for Gavin, because I think Daniel Riley has never seen any of Gavin's work, and I do respect what Gavin is doing for the political prisoners, but on this particular issue, I side strongly with Daniel Riley, that we must have borders and we must have citizenship, and I think Daniel Riley did a great job. I think Gavin would agree with me that Gavin can handle himself, and but at the same time, I think Gavin would even agree with me that Daniel Riley does not need to be in prison. And I hope we can come together on our common ground that we need to help our political prisoners, even if there's many political prisoners, you know what, that I don't agree with. And I know that Gavin is a big enough man to say that, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that even though he may disagree with Daniel Riley on immigration, I hope that Gavin would agree with many of us that Daniel Riley does not need to be in prison. Take care, God bless, and it's always fun in the Patriot community. And take care and have a great day.